Welcome, everybody. My name is Rachel. I'm presenter here. Chat with an Academy Scientist is a really cool program that we do on the weekends to connect people, mostly who work here, but scientists that are doing work in the field, entomologists, all kinds of different professions. So it's a cool way to get kind of the behind-the-scenes stuff, we can say. But today we have Kathi, who actually works here and is a volunteer here as well. You're very busy. What do you do here at the Academy?
So at the Academy, I work in the visualization studio, and I work on a collaboration with other planetariums to tell environmental stories about our planet in planetariums around the country.
Yeah, which sounds pretty cool, but today we're talking about the whale entanglement team that she's a part of. So can you tell us about what WET does as a group?
Yeah, so we are the whale entanglement team. I think we should be called the whale disentanglement team, but I guess doesn't roll off your tongue as easy as WET does. But we're a group of volunteers here in Northern California. We have about 15 primary people and 30 extended team members, and we respond to entangled whales anywhere from San Luis Obispo County up to the Oregon border. So we have a huge rescue range, and whenever we work with the National Marine Fisheries Service, so if an entangled whale is reported, a call will go in. It could come in via Channel 16 on the U.S. Coast Guard, or we have a 1-800 number, 1-877-SOS-WHALE, and that number goes to the National Marine Fisheries Service, and they contact our team, and we assemble together, get a boat, and get out on the water as quickly as we can to find the whale.
Yeah, so why does WET exist? Like, what kind of trouble are these different whales or marine mammals getting into?
Yeah, so this is an example of what we call human interaction. So there's some human involvement in there. And right now what we're seeing is about 20 to 80% of just the humpback whales in the Pacific Ocean have signs of scarring on them from lines.
Wow.
So it could be coming from fishing gear, or it could be coming from marine debris. So we're part of a team that goes out there. We try and recover the gear to return it to the fishermen because there is monetary value in that for that family. But we also take that information and report it back to the National Marine Fisheries Service so we know what type of gear it was, what season it was being used, so we could collect this information and also kind of help develop policies that allow for fishing during certain periods of the year, or also help improve the gear or fishing methods. So part of this is awareness, thank you all for coming to the chat today.
Yeah.
We want people to be aware that this is a problem that's happening out there, but also we want to be involved in the prevention, because really the disentanglement part is the Band-Aid. That's not going to solve the overall problem. As long as we keep putting nets and taking things out of the ocean, we're going to run into these issues. There's co-occurrences of whales and fisheries and just our own pure enjoyment out there.
Yeah, definitely. So are these whales curious about these lines? Or, for example, do they ever get entangled in kelp?
They do. They're very curious. They like to play.
Yeah.
Up here is a humpback whale. This is taken in Monterey. This is a photo from Marine Life Studies, and down here. And what looks like could be an entanglement with lines wrapped around the head or over the tail. This is actually kelp that they got just kind of by playing in the kelp. They picked it up, and with kelp they can typically break it off and swim away. But when they get fishing line or nets or other type of gear on them, they don't have arms like we do, so they can't just pull the net off. They'll try and roll and twist and try and get out of it. Maybe that works sometimes. Sometimes that could make that wrap or that entanglement even more difficult.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. So where does the majority of this debris come from that they're getting tangled into?
The majority of reports that we see here in California are actually crab traps. Most of the gear we pick up have been gray whales and humpback whales, and they're picked up with pot gear anywhere. We've disentangled whales that had gear from Oregon. We've had disentangled whales that have picked up gear right here in Tiburon. So we're seeing mostly trap gear.
Definitely. And do they also, not only do they get tangled in it, do they also eat it sometimes? Can it be in their stomach?
They can. We've seen there's a sperm whale up at Point Reyes that was discovered dead on the beach, and it had over 200 pounds of fishing line in its stomach that had eaten. The gray whales and humpback whales, they won't typically eat it. Gray whales will feed off the bottom, so they open their mouth and skim along the bottom, and that's where they may pick up nets in their mouth or along the side of their body, and that's where we typically kind of see the issues happening. But
yeah, definitely. Yeah. So what are some encounters that you have had recently? Can you give us some examples of of ones you've heard of in general around here?
Yeah, I can do that. And I think one thing I should have pointed out earlier with the slides up here, up on the left, that is net gear that's going out. These are crab pots, and this is what the crab pots look like at the surface. So if you go out in the year during crab pot season, it's like a grid of pots with these 2 floats that you'll see. But this year we've had 3 reports of entangled gray whales that have been coming up from the coast. So gray whales spend the winter in Baja breeding and mating, and they spend the summer up in the Arctic feeding. So during this long migration period, which is the longest of any marine mammal, they're picking up gear. So we've had 3 calls this year. The most recent one was in April, and there was a report of a whale just right off the cliff house that was in the rocks, that was floundering around, that was stuck in gear. We had a team assembled. We got out there to go find the whale, and within the couple hours, the whale had been gone, and we found nets in the rocks, so we assumed that the whale got itself free and swam away, but that's not the typical solution. And I want to point out that finding the whale is the hardest part, because we get reports that, oh, there's an entangled whale, it's in this position, and typically they're coming from whale watching vessels or from fishing boats that are on a timeline that need to get back to where they started from at a certain time to either drop off people or pick up new passengers. And these whales are mostly free swimming. Most of them are not grounded, so they could be traveling in any direction. So within the 4 hours or so it may take us to get out there, the whale likely has moved from that spot. So that's probably the most difficult thing when it comes to the entangled whales, is actually finding the entangled whale.
I can definitely, imagine that that's very difficult. There's a lot of factors involved. In situations where you do find them, how do you do it?
That's a great question. How many people have seen Jaws? Anybody?
Yeah.
So how did they catch Jaws? How did they slow down Jaws? What did they do to Jaws?
Oh.
Pardon? Yeah, harpoon. Like they put a barrel on them. Like the whale disentanglement techniques actually came from the whaling days. We put not harpoons, we use tools like this. This is called a grapple, and you can see all the prongs are pointed this way. So if we throw this or attach this to a pole and reach it out to a whale, this sharp part is not going to poke the whale. This part's going to hit the body. But what we want to do is attach ourselves to the whale, and we have this lovely guy right here. This is actually a telemetry buoy, so a satellite tag will go in here with a GPS transmitter, so we could actually track the whale if we're not able to respond that day. But we want to attach this or another type of big float to the whale, so it helps us with our visibility, and it also slows the whale down a little bit and keeps it at the surface. So what we would do is take a grapple like this and have it attached to a line that would be attached to this buoy or another buoy, and we would toss this into the entanglement on the whale. So that way we create a connection between this and the whale, and this is what we call a working line. And what we do then is we don't want to cut any gear until we know where the source of the entanglement is, because the more gear we have to work with, the better it is. So what we'll do is we'll walk hand over this line till we could get close enough to the whale to see where the entanglement is. And even myself, I bet Rachel, you could even do it with enough. If you bring the line over the bow of the boat and apply tension in the right place, you can hold a 50-ton whale with one hand. I've done it with a 47-foot Coast Guard cutter. I've also done it with a whale. So we'll work our way up close to the whale until we can find the source of the entanglement. Once we see that source, we develop a plan, and we have specialized tools. We have curved knives, and again, the sharp part's on the inside, so that way if we're poking out at the whale, we're not cutting the whale with a knife. We have knives that are similar, like a flying knife here, and you could put this into the line and cut it yourself. You could add another buoy to this line, and as the whale moves, the drag will eventually cut the line. So our goal is to kind of cut the line there and then pull up as much gear as we can, identify it, return the gear to the fishermen, and report the information to the National Marine Fisheries Service.
Very cool. And what are the other tools that you have? I bet you guys were curious, so it was hanging on this cart, right?
This is just another example of a knife. This is just one blade. And again, we have long poles. They're about 8 foot long. We could attach 2 poles and have a 16-foot long pole and be able to over there to Madagascar and disentangle that lemur. We also have, this is just a carabiner. It would screw onto the end of the pole. You could use this to attach to a buoy. And then behind me, we have some other tools over here. We have our own personal knives. So if we happen to be that close to the whale, which hopefully we won't be, you can cut it. But one of the whales, somebody was asking about the photo at the start. That whale was a gray whale up in Mendocino that we disentangled. And we actually were able to kind of get close enough. There was so much slack that we could just hand cut the line.
Definitely. And an important question is, do you get in the water with them, or all of this is done on the boat?
That's a great question, and I'm really glad you brought that up. So with whale disentanglement, all the work that we do is from a boat. We do not put people in the water. It's against the law to put people in the water. So we work from small inflatables, and all of our work is done via those small inflatables.
Yeah.
Up there you have a picture of a sea lion, and I also do sea lion disentanglement, so we had to put one photo in there. With sea lions, people do get in the water with sea lions. It's very different in size. There have been people with whales that have died. There's a fellow in New Zealand that they hadn't found his body, very experienced, had done many disentanglements before, got in the water, and one movement of the pec fin, like humpback whales, they're 16 feet long. One movement of that or one movement of the tail, if the current, if it accidentally bumps you, it's just too dangerous. So that's why we're in the boat.
Oh, so you stay in the boat, you try to get as close as possible to this whale. Are you in danger at all when you're on the boat?
You could be.
Okay.
Yeah, the animals don't necessarily, they're injured. They've got their kind of sixth sense up right now.
Yeah.
They're struggling to survive, and then here comes this boat, and our job is to kind of stay close to the whale, give the whale its space, but let it know that our presence is there. And we're reaching out with tools or trying to throw things, so they could get mad. They could. I've had the boat hit with a tail before. Luckily, it was underneath, but you never know what could happen. So we wear life jackets. We have we'd like to take the Coast Guard out with us if possible, have other boats there for safety in case something happens.
Yeah, definitely. So this is a do not do picture,
This
right?
is a do not do picture, but this is the story that most people know about when you hear about whale disentanglement. This was a humpback whale out at the Farallon Islands that was disentangled. Some scuba divers had gotten in the water. They successfully disentangled the whale, but it's not something that we want to repeat. After this particular attempt, there was a whole change in the California disentanglement program.
Yeah, it's very important.
Yeah.
So you've been mentioning a lot of whales. Can you tell us all the animals that could get entangled and the ones that you serve with wet?
Yeah, so with wet, we mostly focus on large whales. So we, out here on the California coast, our primary animals that we disentangle are gray whales and humpback whales.
Yeah.
But we also have blue whales out here. We have sperm whales. We have beak whales. We have killer whales. We have dolphins. We have porpoises. We have an abundant supply of marine life out here. But we primarily deal with the large whales.
Yeah. So maybe not everybody's prepared to do this kind of work, but they can go whale watching. So you can see all of these whale watching.
Definitely. Right now, they've been seeing blue whales already this summer, so it's a really exciting time to get out there. It's blue whale season, humpback whale season. Those are the primary whales that you'll see, and they've been putting on a good show down in Monterey. We've been getting a lot of killer whales there as well. Yeah, this is a photo here behind me. This is from April 2012 up in Bodega Bay. That's myself. This is Peter Fulkins and Peter Ottersbach. And this is a gray whale that was actually grounded in the bay. It had 2 crab pot traps stuck through its mouth, through the lower jaw, and twisted below it, so it could kind of move in a circle and a rotation. But it was stuck down there. So here we are trying to assess the scene. You can see we have some lines. There's the working line I was talking about that's attached to the whale. And I don't know if anybody knows, but this is off topic, but those little marks there, those are rake marks from killer whale teeth. So if you ever see kind of scrapes on whales that look like that, they call them rake marks.
Very cool. A lot of interesting stories you have. Why is wet, the work overall, so important for these marine mammals? What would happen to them without it?
Without it, they would suffer a slow and painful death, to be blunt. But also, we are having so much co-occurrence with all of our fisheries out there, with all of our whale watching boats out there. We're also kind of helping being an outreach and awareness. So we want people to be aware that our decisions do have an impact on the oceans. And we're trying to do as much as we can to gather information to help people improve fishing gear, for example, or ways they're fishing, like with loops along the bottom, like Titan lines or weighted lines, so that way we can prevent entanglements and people can still continue to fish and do what they need to do.
Yeah, definitely. So how did you get into this work? What kind of training do you need to do this in the wet team?
For the wet team, we welcome anybody on the team. Documentation, communication, photography. I started off as a volunteer at the Marine Mammal Center 11 years ago. Wow. And I started off with pinnipeds and then moved on to their whale and disentanglement team when they had it, worked with other organizations and volunteered out in the field to get as much experience as I could, and then helped kind of reestablish the wet network down here. So ideally the people, like we have a lot of marine mammal veterinarians on the team, marine mammal researchers, as well as boat captains and people that have just put in a lot of time volunteering. So I say find your passion and go with it.
Yeah, definitely. Might have some future volunteers in the audience.
Yeah, come see me.
Yeah. Well, so what are some things that we can do from shore, like in our day-to-day lives, to help this kind of situation?
If you do see an entangled whale, report it. That's not necessarily from shore, but if you're out on a whale watching boat, when you are on shore, make smart decisions. Like, know where your fish are coming from, how they're being caught, which ocean they're coming from. That could have an impact on this. And just generally caring about the ocean.
Yeah, definitely. Well, any questions from the audience? Covered a lot. Yes. That's a good question. She asked if they ever try to return the gear to the fishermen. Yes. Yeah.
We do. We identify, we have all the markers and tags, and we turn that information in, and the National Marine Fisheries Service then contacts that fisherman and let them know that we have their gear or their gear. We found their gear that may have been missing. But we make every attempt to identify it and get in contact with the person whose nets those were.
Yeah. Yeah, the accountability of it, Yeah,
I think it's just a problem of co-occurrence. Like marine mammals can't leave the ocean. We're dependent on the ocean. Co-occurrences are going to happen. So, but if people are, we could find out if people are fishing out of season, for example, or left their gear out there for too long, or depending on the type of gear, like we have only 2 gillnet fisheries here in the state of California. Depending on kind of if we are seeing gillnet come in, is that coming in through an authorized fishery? Is that from international? But we try and collect all this information because we really think that kind of the awareness and the more data that we can gather will help us with the prevention in the future.
Yeah, good question. Yeah. How is WET funded? Another good one.
That is a very good question. It's primarily funded through personal donations. We are nonprofits that are associated with Alaska Whale Foundation and Marine Life Studies. So we have gotten several grants through those organizations to purchase the equipment. It is very expensive to purchase. All of our own time is donated. When we have gone out in responses, it's been our own costs that we've covered, that we've had to pay for, like a hotel overnight. It's coming out of our own pocket. We're trying to work with the National Marine Fisheries Service to establish some type of reimbursement for some of the activities we're doing. But right now it's all volunteer-based, so
Yeah. Luckily, there's a lot of dedicated volunteers like yourself that keep it going.
Yeah, and if anybody is interested in volunteering or donating, check out the Marine Life Studies page.
Yeah, in the back. Oh, what happens if the whale is injured as well?
That's a great question. What we're going to try and do moving forward is take a vet out with us. We did have one whale, actually not this one, this was Bodega Bay. We had a different whale that we disentangled up in Mendocino, that the entanglement, we could see a line going across the back of the whale, and we saw like 2 floats over here on this side, so it looked like the entanglement went around the back and on this side. And when we kegged the whale and put the tension on it, you heard this noise and the whale rolled over, and its pec fin came off, and it had been mostly necrotic, so it wasn't as traumatic as it could have been, but it definitely was traumatic. But then I would have loved to have had a vet on the board. But what we did is just backed off of the whale and gave it some space and monitored its vitals and kind of stayed with it. Salt water is a great healer for many injuries. That particular one, it would have been nice to have some additional medicine to give to the whale. I know that in the Sacramento River several years ago, we had 2 humpback whales that swam up to Sacramento, and with those, they actually delivered medication via DART. So we're going to look at incorporating those methods as we move forward. But the whale that lost its pec fin did get fully disentangled and swam away as soon as possible in a straight line. So
in a straight line.
And nobody has, we alerted from Washington down to Mexico that there was a 1-pecked whale. Should it be found, nobody has seen it yet.
Very cool. Yeah, good questions. Any more questions? No? Well, I think Kathi will be here for a few more minutes, and especially if you want to check out the tools up close. They're very interesting. But let's give her a round of applause. Thank you so much, Kathi.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah,
this was fun. Thank you all for coming today.
Yeah, next time you come, be sure to check out our Chat with Academy Scientist program. We do a lot of cool stories. Have a great afternoon, everybody.